Alright, so I am going to be looking at an internal replay today. It's between AlphaStar, who's playing Terran, and TLO, also known as Dario Wunsch, a very strong Zerg pro gamer from Germany on the Team Liquid. So this game in particular is pretty fascinating. AlphaStar does some things that are very human-like in its play, and then it does a few things that are very not human-like, which are kind of funny that we'll get to. So let's go ahead and dive into this replay. And I'll be putting it up above normal game speed here and there, just to speed along through the uninteresting parts. So the first thing we see is AlphaStar putting down a depot at the top of its ramp. This is a strategy you use defensively as Terran is generally considered a little bit weak in the early game, and their buildings can do things like fly and go underground. So you can make a path for your units to go in and out of your base, but you can block your opponent. This is something developed by players about maybe 18 or 19 years ago, and it's been used pretty steadily ever since. So very normal to be seeing this from AlphaStar. I'm going to go ahead and pop up the production tab at the top left of the screen, just to keep track of what's going on here. So AlphaStar is going ahead and expanding very normal stuff, continuing to build this wall in so that it's safe against early attacks, and it's building a Reaper. Now, the Reaper, this is an early game scouting unit. You notice how AlphaStar is checking all these locations nearby its base. It's trying to make sure that TLO isn't doing anything out of the ordinary. Now it's going across the map with the Reaper to check on what TLO is doing at home. So since it's already figured out that, for instance, TLO hasn't hidden anything down here, and TLO isn't sneaking any units around to try to do damage to AlphaStar, AlphaStar goes and checks what's going on here. So you can see the Reaper, again, it's a very fast unit. It runs in here to check what's going on. It sees 4 Zerglings, it sees a Queen, it sees a very normal amount of drones. This looks very normal, so you're not too frightened at this point of anything occurring. Now let's follow what else it does with this Reaper here. Reaper, of course, can jump up small cliffs like that, and it jumps up just, again, to check what's going on. You can tell a lot by what you see and what you don't see in StarCraft 2. For instance, when the Reaper comes up, it will have checked both of the different hatcheries that they haven't started to morph into a layer. That tells AlphaStar that there's not going to be any high technology units coming anytime soon. It's also checking on things, again, like the unit counts, making sure the right amount of queens are around. Sometimes it can poke in, see the drones, and of course it'll want to check if there is a third base down here. So now, after checking everything, it did dart in, and it had vision of that right there. So now this Reaper has really done everything that it's meant to do. Let's go ahead and check what AlphaStar is doing at home. It looks like right now we have a factory connected to this reactor, which allows it to build 2 Hellions at once. Hellions are a very important early game unit for Terran against Zerg. They are very quick as well, and can do some economic damage to your opponent. I'll get into that in a little bit. The starport is coming up, so just continuing the technology forward. This is going to allow AlphaStar to build flying units. So the Reaper jumps up once again, diving in, and this time sacrificing that Reaper, but getting a huge amount of information. So at this point, AlphaStar is quite sure that it's not under attack, and it can play just pretty normally from here. It doesn't need to start building any defenses. Now, this is one of the parts that is very interesting to me in a different way. It's kind of funny, not hugely game-altering, but let me explain this. So AlphaStar has started a supply depot right here. This is normal. Just like I explained before, how you make a wall in up here so that you can stop enemy attacks from coming in. That's something that Terran in StarCraft 2 does kind of all game long. It's very common to see a wall here so that Zerg can't just run up and attack you once again. If they do try to attack, they'll be hitting buildings, and that'll give you time to reposition your army and actually fight against them. So it's very, very common. For instance, we see walls here on this map. Sometimes we even see walls up here. You'll see them just about anywhere that the Terran feels that they need a little bit more protection. So this is very normal that AlphaStar is putting this depot down. Now let's watch this. Okay, so AlphaStar just canceled that depot. And now it's going to build another depot here. You can see it already queued up. There is absolutely no reason for that. There's especially no reason because we're going to see another depot constructed here just momentarily. See there? That's the queued up depot. The SCV is coming down to build it right now. So this is just like a very funny thing. You would never see a human player do this because all it does is slow down the depot. And by starting a depot and then canceling it, it costs you 25 minerals, which isn't the biggest deal in the world, but why would you ever do that? So just kind of a funny little thing that you would really never see from human players. And in fact, if I saw this from a human player, I would just be like, oh, that's weird. I guess he misclicked on his keyboard or something like that. Like it could only be a mistake, and a really silly one that you wouldn't make if you're a good player. So let's take a look at what AlphaStar is doing with these Hellions. Normally 4 Hellions is the number where you start poking out onto the map. A lot of times what Hellions will want to do is approach the Zerg base on the edges, for instance over here, to see if everything is placed correctly. For instance, we see TLO already has 3 queens here. The reason why there are 3 queens standing here is because they're kind of a defensive unit for TLO, and he actually probably expects for Hellions to pop in. If the Hellions pop in and the queens are out of position, like let's say these 3 queens are here, or even worse for TLO, up here, then AlphaStar could very easily, or any Terran player really, could very easily come in and kill these drones. And protecting your drones is protecting your economy. This is how you gain your money, so that's a huge part of StarCraft 2, is trying to keep your workers alive and trying to kill your opponent's workers. So TLO has good positioning here. But AlphaStar is sitting back very, very defensively right now. Now already on 6 Hellions, which that's a lot. Like, you are able to really run around the map and kind of do what you want at this point in the game. This early on, it's very rare for Zerg to have anything that can really fight against these Hellions. So it seems to me that AlphaStar is playing a very, very safe game. We saw before that AlphaStar lost its Reaper, so it hasn't actually had any more intel for a while. As you can see, now that I've switched to only AlphaStar's vision, it doesn't actually have that much vision outside of its base. Nothing's really out there. Some Marines on the edge looking for anything that might be coming. Just the front building the wall, sitting very defensively right now behind the wall as well. So it seems to me like this is a very defensive stance that AlphaStar is taking. Now we see AlphaStar starting to switch up its buildings. This is very common once you get the right number of Hellions to go ahead and switch your factory over into a tech lab that will allow the factory to make more powerful units such as the siege tank. Likewise, building a barracks on top of this reactor so that you can produce many more Marines. AlphaStar also right now getting the Stem upgrade so that his Marines will gain some speed boosts and attack speed. And right now building a Liberator. Normally, an early game Liberator is a harassment tool for Terran, where you try to sneak it in the edges of your opponent's base, and again, pick off some drones. So this upcoming part is pretty interesting. Notice how the Hellions are still just kind of sitting out front here. They're moving back and forth a little bit. Not a huge reason to do that, but just keeping them active is smart. Of course, TLO can see partially what's going on with this Overlord, but not moving out as of yet. And when I first saw this replay, I thought, wow, this is kind of weird that it's sitting here for this long, but you'll see why in just a second. Alright, so the Liberator has popped out, and at the exact moment the Liberator comes out, AlphaStar is sending out its Hellions. Now, this is actually a pretty high level and pretty common tactic. What you want to do in StarCraft 2, because it's such a fast-paced game, is tax your opponent's multitasking ability. You want to hit multiple locations at once. For instance, if these Hellions come over and just attack into one area, like right here, for instance, that would be pretty easy for TLO to defend, because TLO could use all of his attention upon that. Could just put his eyes there, keep all of his units coming down to fight against it. But what AlphaStar is doing here is sending out 2 attacks at the same time. And when you send out 2 attacks at the same time, even though each attack might be a little bit weaker, it's harder for your opponent to defend against both. So we'll speed this up a little bit. Alright, here we go. Now, starting to poke on the edges, the Hellions moving around. Now watch this. Here comes the Liberator. It's going towards this main base. This is, again, a very common tactic. It's going to come in and siege itself up and make a giant circle to try to attack some drones. And watch what AlphaStar does at the exact same time. So up come the Hellions. This is the more dangerous attack out of the 2 attacks here. So the Liberator has set up. It's made this circle. It can shoot anything within this circle. So it's going to start hitting these drones and dealing some damage. It hasn't shot yet, but it's just about to. And AlphaStar also at the same time running in the Hellions. So what does TLO do? TLO needs to deal with both of these attacks. So let's follow these Hellions. Now you'll notice TLO running up very quickly with his army. The Hellions are going in here. They aren't trying to focus down things like this defensive unit, the Queen. They aren't trying to run by into the same area as the Liberator. The Liberator is taking care of this area, and you can see already the Liberator with 4 kills, doing a very good job. But instead, AlphaStar is trying as best it can to target down the drones. These lines of fire deal damage to everything in the path. So this is why the Hellion attack is very powerful on these mineral lines. We see a lot of drones grouped up, and it can hit quite a few at once. So still microing around, controlling its units very nicely, trying to get as many drones as is possible. And TLO, of course, will eventually clean this up. He has enough units to eliminate all that. So now the Hellions are gone. Also, the Liberator has been picked off, but a lot of damage has actually been done here. I'm going to go ahead and pop up the Workers Lost tab. And 20 drones fell. That's a pretty big deal. 20 drones is quite a lot of TLO's economy. To put this in perspective, right now TLO is on 4 bases. So we have this base, and this base. For full saturation at a base, you need 22 drones. So AlphaStar just killed basically 1/3 of TLO's economy. That was a very successful harassment, and the reason why it was so successful is because AlphaStar did 2 things at the same time. Now let's go back to AlphaStar's base and check out what it's up to right now. AlphaStar is building some siege tanks and actually getting ready to move out. It has a fair amount of Marines here and is building a medevac. A good amount of production facilities as well. And you can tell it's building a 3rd command center now. So this, again, this is a very common way to play. AlphaStar is moving out for an attack, and at the same time as moving out for an attack, it's going to expand to another mineral location to gain even more resources. Now, when you're attacking your opponent, they have to really marshal a lot of their units and a lot of their attention to defend. So that's a perfect time to try to get your own expansion up because they're much less likely to attack you at that time. Again, taxing multitasking on your opponent, forcing them to react to you, these are very important concepts in StarCraft 2. So this attack that's coming out from AlphaStar is really, really strong. These siege tanks deal damage from a very long way away, and you'll notice that it's going to a very specific location. I also want to show, you can see all of these barracks. You see this line coming out, this gray line that I'm hovering over with my mouse right now. These are all rallied to a very specific location right here. So this is actually exactly, as a professional gamer, where you would want to rally your units to. All of the Marines and siege tanks, as they finish being created, will just immediately go to this location. And that's going to reinforce AlphaStar's push. Now, the reason why this area right here is perfect is because it's very close to an easy-to-control location for AlphaStar. Notice all of this gray-purple stuff on the ground. This is Zerg creep generated by these creep tumors, and it increases the speed of Zerg units on it. It's very good defensively, so you don't want to set up on there, because if you do, you can have a little bit of a hard time when all the Zerglings and the Queens and all the Zerg defensive units come to attack you. They just get in there so quickly. Also notice we have some rocks here. These rocks can be taken down, and you can tell that TLO has been working on them. They're only at 164 hit points of their original 2,000. They take a long time to kill off, but when you do kill them off, it gives you a lot more defensive capabilities in the area. You can run through this way, or you can run through this way. But right now, we have kind of a divider here, where if TLO wants to get over here, he has to run all the way around. So this is actually a very common push point on this map. So let's see AlphaStar set up. So AlphaStar sieges both these tanks. These are very long-range units that deal an area of effect damage on anything coming in. Let's take a look. For instance, this siege tank, you can see the little tiny triangles here. This shows the actual range that it hits within. So both these siege tanks covering a fair amount of area. If you follow my mouse once again, it's about that much. So anything Zerg that comes into this area will be hit by the siege tanks, which deal a huge amount of damage. In the meantime, AlphaStar has this medevac in the air to heal the Marines, to keep them alive, to keep the push going longer. Also, the Marines being stimmed, they have an attack upgrade, which is very normal. The Marines shoot very quickly, so for each additional attack you give them, they get way more powerful. And now we're going to watch AlphaStar do a very human-like push. So here AlphaStar has just done a scan. This gives additional vision in the area. These creep tumors that spread all of this creep are actually invisible until you scan them. So AlphaStar wants to remove those. That'll make the creep recede and make the micromanagement harder for the Zerg, the defense harder for the Zerg. Now this is a very strong move here. AlphaStar is starting to attack towards this hatchery. It is very important as Zerg to not lose bases early on. You really need to build your economy and overwhelm your opponent later in the game. So AlphaStar is taking this group of Marines. It's already killed off an Overlord. It's killed off all the creep tumors in the area, so the creep will go back. And now it's going to start putting pressure on this hatchery. TLO has to be very decisive here. So notice immediately TLO pulling the drones up, only losing a couple of them. That is very important. If you lose all those drones, we already saw TLO lose 20 drones. He pulls those away, so only loses 2 more right now. The hatchery has a lot more health at 1,500, so it'll take a little while to die off, which means TLO has time to try to get his counter down. For instance, making more Zerglings, getting more Banelings, getting his queens into position. But he must push this back. I also do want to point out, again, more and more units are rallying up to this location that I pointed out before. So these are going to be able to help in the fight, which means that, again, TLO has to act quickly because this attack is only getting stronger from AlphaStar. So you see as units are popping out, AlphaStar picking them up. And this is a beautiful move. So TLO is coming in for a flanking maneuver. The queens, which have a higher health and take less damage from the siege tanks, are coming in from the side near the siege tanks. They're going to be able to take a lot of that damage and keep fighting. Whereas the lower health units coming in from the other side, we see a lot of Banelings here. We see a lot of Zerglings here. The Banelings are extra dangerous because they deal an area of effect damage when they explode upon things like Marines. The Zerglings are very fast, but a little bit weak. So what TLO's attempting to do is sandwich this army, to flank it from 2 different sides and knock it out. But the second that TLO starts to pull this tactic off, AlphaStar is once again speeding up its Marines, stimming them, and running away. This is a very common micro tactic, and it will draw these units into the siege tanks supporting fire. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, pulling back directly into the siege tank fire. You can see them shelling those queens. And the second TLO turns around and tries to get his queens out of this area, AlphaStar turns and chases them, dealing more damage to them as well. Again, this is very, very human-like and very, very strong. Now here, this is a lot of pressure being put onto the hatchery. TLO's hatchery now down to 200 health out of 1,500. It's going to die very soon. So just the fact that AlphaStar is putting so much damage onto it, it's forcing TLO to move in. At the same time, AlphaStar setting up another siege tank. Of course, we do have more and more units being rallied in. Let's see how this is dealt with. So I'm going to actually slow this down just a little bit so it's easier to watch. This is below normal game speed. So the Zerglings coming in, trying to surround those Marines a little bit. Here come the Banelings for that splash damage. And they actually end up clearing all the Marines from the initial group and getting the siege tank, the forward siege tank, very, very low on health. Of course, we still have a few Queens here as well, which will come down to help clear out that siege tank. So TLO's done a reasonable job clearing a lot of that army, but again, AlphaStar has been rallying up here the entire time. These are all brand new, fresh Marines, a brand new and fresh medevac, and here's another one as well. The initial 2 siege tanks still in the same position. So AlphaStar back at it. Even though TLO held that off for the time being, AlphaStar wants to continue this tactic because it's working pretty well so far. So we'll speed up to normal speed once again. And now the exact same tactic out of AlphaStar. Getting up here, dealing some damage. The Queen's coming and poking. You can see TLO is really gathering his forces right now. He knows that if he takes too much more damage on this hatchery, it's started to heal a little bit, but it doesn't have that much health, so TLO really needs to save it. So once again, the Queen's going into the siege tank range, and this is TLO's final stand here. His whole Zergling force coming down, trying to surround these Marines. He's using a bunch of move commands to try to get behind the Marines to stop them from running away in a micromanagement technique that we call stutter stepping, where you run back attack, run back attack, run back attack. It's something that makes Marines very powerful. TLO's trying to prevent that, but AlphaStar, I'm going to slow it down once again, a little bit too strong. Really nice running away right there. The Zergling's trying to get on top of everything. The Queen's coming up to fight as well, but it's just barely not enough. And AlphaStar is going to be able to break through here. And that is it. TLO GG'd. Really a fascinating game from AlphaStar. It executed this push really, really well. It was really fascinating as well to see AlphaStar do the 2-pronged harassment technique earlier on to get damage in. And the fact that it got 20 drones and followed up with just one big attack is really smart as well. A lot of times you can just continue to attack multiple locations at once, but obviously if you put all of your army together, it's going to be more powerful. And in this case, it was just powerful enough that TLO was unable to stop it. And again, TLO is quite a strong Zerg professional gamer. So this was an impressive game from AlphaStar, and one of many interesting ones that it's played. I hope that you've enjoyed.